Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Mark. Thanks for coming and joining me today and having a chat.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, as as usual, my plan for today is just to have a really informal chat, get to know you a little bit, so that everyone can get to know a little, including me, get to know a little bit of what you're about, what you do, what you're up to in the language learning world, and just hear a little bit about your personal story. Of course,
Yeah,
I've seen a few of your things up on the internet. I've chatted with you on Twitter. I've watched some of your YouTube videos, and I think you're doing some interesting stuff, and I'm sure everyone will think the same.
thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Um, so like I said, I wanna open with a very classic opening, which is I just want to invite you to introduce yourself a little bit. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was your linguistic environment at home? Um, and what languages do you speak now?
Right. So, although I consider myself an Ohioan from the state of Ohio in the US, I was actually born in Los Angeles, which is a thing that not many people know. It's not really out there, but I moved there back home when I was, well, not back home, but where my mom is from. She's from Ohio. And I moved there when I was young, and that's where I grew up. My mom is American, my dad was Mexican. But I grew up monolingually. Um, my mom says she spoke a little Spanish to me when, um, I was a boy, and I would say kind of like things like pollo, chicken or something like that. But you know, for all intents and purposes, I grew up to speak in one language, English, and it wasn't till 2014 I moved to Mexico City. Um, it came under kind of tragic circumstances. My dad passed away, and I always kind of had the idea to visit Mexico to learn Spanish, to get to know my Mexican side. But I thought it was just some dream that was never going to happen, and I thought I was just going to continue following just like the 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 rhythm of how things work. University, job, apartment, just continuing like that. But when that happened with my dad, it kind of like shook me up a bit, and I had to make some life decisions. And I said, you know what, this would be good for me. So I came here in 2014, and that's when my language journey started, so to speak. I moved in with my uncle, and he told me that I was going to be learning Spanish. And to my surprise, teaching English, I told him I thought that I could only speak it. I didn't know how to teach it, but then I started my whole journey into that world as well. And those two things make up a great part of my life, and they are passions and things that really fulfill me to the fullest.
Nice. And now you're learning Russian. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. And when I started learning Spanish, I started getting interested in the idea of learning languages. It came about a bit slowly, but the interest was there. And for some reason, I just knew that Russian was going to be the next language. But I took a year of like this Spanish exchange program that they have at one of the universities here, and I thought it was I thought I was so good in Spanish after this year, and I decided that I was going to start taking some Russian classes. So I took maybe like three. I found a teacher, and basically I realized that my Spanish was only at a certain level, and that I should concentrate on that. So I put that on hold until 2019, the first of the first day of the year I started, and I've been going pretty strong ever since.
Right. So you had kind of ideas of studying Russian actually a long time ago, but you put it off
Mhm.
because I see. I didn't know that. So when was it when you first were thinking, okay, I'm gonna start some Russian, and then decided that you were going to put it off?
It was like mm, it was in 2015, but I took like three classes with a teacher, and all we basically did were like the Russian sounds. I mean, you can't really cover
Yeah.
much in three lessons, but or around three lessons. But I realized that what, I can't be starting in another language now when I see so many gaps in my Spanish. Maybe I was at a pretty decent conversation level, but there's so much more to language.
Yeah.
learning language.
Yeah. You never stop. That's for sure. So did you say at the same time that you were starting those Russian lessons, there was a Spanish exchange program which you were going to go on?
Yeah, I actually did that for a year. It's a university here called La UNAM. It's a kind of a really well-known university in Latin America, and they have a really nice program for foreigners to learn. It was a really nice environment, met a lot of nice people, and I would say the program was overall quite good.
Was it a Spanish language program? Or
Yeah,
was it
it was for foreigners to learn the Spanish language, right? So it was just exactly for that.
Okay, very cool. Yeah. I've it's still my dream to study at a university abroad and be able to immerse myself in a language that way. I haven't been able to do it. I had it on the cards for this year, but
Oh,
we'll see with what's like you with your Russian. You're like, I want to go to Russia and I want to immerse myself in that language environment. And then COVID hits, and you're like, maybe next year, or if we'll see.
absolutely. What language did you want to do this with?
Um, it was French, and it's always been French. But recently, I've been enjoying Chinese so much that I've also started considering doing it with Chinese.
Right. I swear I see you tweet more about Chinese than anything. So I've had the impression that that was kind of like the main language you're into now.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is the main language I'm into now, and the reason why most of my activity is kind of all about Chinese is because I'm not actively studying any other language, and I'm actually not spending even that much time with other languages. Like whenever I'm exposed to French, it's like I'm watching something, or I don't read stuff that often, but I might be watching something or listening to music or chatting with friends, and that's I have started doing something a little bit interesting during the pandemic. Just briefly, I'll mention
Hmm.
this because I think you might be interested in this. Um, because of the pandemic, of course, a lot of activities take place online now. And have you heard of Toastmasters, the organization?
It sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you what it's about. So I would say
Okay,
no.
I might as well explain it anyway because there'll be people
All
listening
right.
who,
Let me
yeah.
know.
So Toastmasters is an organization which essentially has its goal is to help you develop your public speaking and leadership skills, but it's firmly rooted in kind of being able to deliver speeches and speak in public. And
Okay.
I joined one from my university here in Melbourne, and I went to a few of the free first trial events, and I quickly realized that there were a lot of people who didn't have English as a first language in those sessions.
Mm.
And so what I did, I think it was on my third session, I said, just a quick question, who here speaks English as a second language? And everyone put their hand up.
Oh.
So obviously I was super impressed, and this gave me an idea, which was to do Toastmasters and develop my public speaking skills in French. So
Oh.
what I'm now doing is I'm joining a Toastmasters club from Quebec, Canada. Um,
Wow.
and so every week I didn't do it last week because I was camping, but every week for the past kind of period of time I've been going to these online events with a bunch of Quebecois speaking French. So that's where how my French is being
Interesting.
kept alive a little bit as well. Anyway, I've
Yeah,
still got more questions for you.
you gotta you gotta find a way to keep it alive, and I'll comment on some things. Um, being a teacher, in high school and even in college, um, I was not a good public speaker, and I mean I'm not saying that I am one now, but it was something that I was really afraid of. But being in front of a classroom teaching somehow magically really helped me for that, because I noticed that when I had to do it um, outside of the classroom, that I could do it, quite well, surprisingly well. If I had to do a speech for like a Spanish class, I could, or, I was the best man at 2 weddings within the last few years, and I had to do these speeches in front of hundreds of people. And I attribute this all to my teaching, because if it weren't for that, I would be that like that kind of super nervous kid again. So that was really nice. And to talk about the university thing, if you can get a chance to do that, then definitely do it. Because I was just thinking about, and I kind of forgot, because I took like a year of that intensive program, and then I let some time pass, maybe like, I don't know, maybe 2 years. And I thought, man, you know what? I think I should just take some of those classes again. So I kind of retook some of those classes. But then when I finished the last level again, I was really close with one of the teachers. And I said, what should I do with my Spanish? And she gave me an idea that literally just basically changed my life. She said, why don't you go take classes at the university? You know, it's a really good university. And like, oh, you know what? That's a great idea. Like, so I started to take linguistics classes and Spanish linguistics classes at a university. And I did that for maybe, I think it was like 2 years, at least a year and a half. But yeah. And I think this is what really kind of like transformed everything in terms of like being a real kind of legit, I don't know, Spanish speaker, being one with kind of the culture, because, you know, or the people, because, you know, at these um, language programs, you're there with a bunch of foreigners. Yes, you meet a lot of nice people, and that has its value as well. But, you know, when I first got here, I fell into the international circle, and I had to get myself out of that. And this experience was so nice because I was taking university level classes of subjects that I was really interested in, meeting really nice people, having a real authentic experience. So really nice stuff. That's the one thing that really changed my Spanish.
Yeah, because this was all in Mexico. So you're at a that's correct? Yeah. So you're at a Mexican
Hmm.
university with Mexican students in Mexican classes, and that makes all the
Exactly.
difference.
I just asked, hey, you know what? I'm interested in these classes. Could I just come to class and take them? And almost every teacher said yes. And I mean, it was just an incredible experience. So.
So you don't wait in Mexico. What are the university fees?
Um, they have this thing called oyente, which is like basically it would be like a listener. I mean, I guess in English it's called auditor. I mean, I never heard that word when I was in school, but I guess the word
Ah,
is auditor.
yeah. No,
So
I get it now.
you just show up, and you take part in the class, and it was really, really cool.
You don't get a formal certificate at the end
Hmm.
after having
I
completed the
wasn't
class or a
interested in that.
course. Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted the experience to be among people of this country. I wanted to learn about the subjects because they're also quite interesting. And, you know, that became like my new main Spanish activity. I mean, that's like real immersion.
No way. So how many classes did you end up doing? Or are you still
I
doing
mean,
classes? That
no, 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 I haven't done this for a while, but I don't know. Must have probably, I don't know. I mean, I was going a fair part of the day, you know, at least on some days 3 classes, and these classes were maybe, can you remember, like maybe an hour and a half or so, something like that. So I mean, I was going 5 days a week, and I was taking basically like a normal size schedule, but I was just soaking that all up, you know.
yeah,
So
that's the dream. That's the actual
it's
dream.
really nice. And I had this idea that I was going to be you know, a Spanish professor. So I thought, well, what better than being at like one of the best universities in Latin America, learning from some of the best professors, um, learning about linguistics and Spanish linguistics. And well, this is information that I can take with me and use one day when I need to. Like, I'll just be more prepared. But I've kind of changed my mind about maybe, you know, being a Spanish professor. I don't know if that's the route I want to go anymore, but for a time it was. And I mean, it was just amazing preparation for that, you know.
What do you think the route might be now? Or are you just not sure?
Mm.
This is a
I
big
have this
question.
idea. Yeah, I have this idea, and it may take maybe a question of decades. But I don't know. I'm thinking right now it would be nice to open a school, even just a small one for little children to study Spanish. But I realize that's going to take capital. So I think about how can I even get to that place in the first place. So I kind of have the idea now to be a Spanish interpreter at a hospital to kind of like reestablish myself back in American society, have some kind of stable thing, something where I can use my languages. And this is the idea I have for now. And as far as my channel goes, I don't know where that's going to go. I'm having fun doing it now, but I mean, there could be something there as well, you know.
Yep. Okay, cool. Very cool. I want so it sounds like you're pretty well established in Mexico now. Like you're talking about kind of even reintegrating back into America, like
Seriously,
yeah.
reintegrate.
Well, obviously there was a period of time where that world was totally new to you when you first arrived in 2014. So what
Mhm.
was it like when you arrived? Like, did you speak any? How much Spanish were you able to understand? How how was it? Did you experience culture shock upon arriving? What was it like?
Well, yeah. Um, just a quick comment. You know, I went to Las Vegas about a year and a half ago, and I remember flying back and you know seeing like this huge city under my eyes and going back in taxi and thinking back home. So you know, it really does feel like home. This city for me feels like home. But I remember the first day that I got here, and that was a beautiful experience as well. Just knowing that this whole literally adventure was just completely in front of you, waiting to happen. I remember being in Ohio the day before taking the plane and thinking things are really going to change. And honestly, it was like everything that I hoped that it could have been. But I didn't have anything that we could call as culture shock, maybe some small differences, but never anything that could be considered shock. So, of course, Mexico and United States are two completely different places, but at the same time, you know, in Mexico and the Mexican people, I mean, they have like a lot of taste in kind of just things that they like come from the US, you know. I find that the city, like people are just so crazy about music and I love it because you know, I go to these concerts. Maybe I'll see one of my favorite bands, you know, obviously in English, and it's just like this communal experience. It's way better than seeing concerts in the States, by the way, because you know, it's like people with as much passion as you. And I mean, I'm one of those guys that likes music or has liked music more than the average person. So I really relate to people who like music and language, you know. So um, but I actually adapted here quite quite fast. And maybe it was because of like just the straight integration from day one. You know, I remember, you know, arriving to my uncle's house and the next day all my family was there waiting for me just to welcome me. And then shortly after I started taking classes to become an English teacher, like kind of training things. So was already starting meeting people. Then I went to this university where I was doing this Spanish, language program. So I got, you know, like I hit the ground running, right? And maybe not so much with like Mexican, like all Mexican things all the time. It was definitely like a gradual, just like getting into it because, like I said, I mean, I did fall into like the English world. You know, sometimes it wasn't my fault. I was doing the English teacher route, and then, at this program, what will happen in any program is that Americans will stick to the Americans, the Japanese will find the Japanese, and every every
Yeah.
nationality basically finds each other, and it's just one of those things you gotta take care of. And even though that my main friends became a multinational group, but the main language was English, and for me, I wanted to make a change, and I knew that you know just being in this group and only in this group, it was just going to be disastrous for what I was trying to do. And I'm still friends with those people, so it's not like I wanted to write them off as people. I'm not like that, but I knew that there needed to be some fundamental changes of how I went about this whole thing.
Yeah. I totally get that. It's yeah, it's not it's not even so much a social thing, it's more of a linguistic thing. You don't want to be stuck in the linguistic bubble. You know what I mean? Because that can happen. You
Hmm.
go abroad, you go to a country where a different language is spoken, but you stay in a little microcosm of your native language, which is you know, it depends what your goals are, but obviously you as a language learner, that's at the forefront of your mind.
Right. I mean, those were at the beginning stages, but there was one thing that I knew. I'm like, I'm in Mexico. I have to learn Spanish. It would be ridiculous if I didn't get, a real grasp on this. I mean, I'm half Mexican. It would just be just so ridiculous to waste this opportunity. It was this dream that I had from way long before. So it was kind of like getting my feet wet and just going at it slowly but surely. Then eventually, I'm the guy I am today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you're like, well, this was at the beginning stages, because this is the thing. It's not like we pop out of the womb and we're like language learner. You know what I mean? So,
Gotta learn languages.
yeah. So obviously, this experience wasn't just an experience for you of kind of wasn't just an experience of learning Spanish, but it also piqued your interest in language learning as an area in and of itself, which I find interesting. How did it
Absolutely.
how did it grow from just being I'm going to learn Spanish because I'm here in Mexico and I've got this side of my heritage to I'm interested in learning more languages?
Yeah, right. And it wasn't just like a linguistic exploration; it was a bit of a cultural exploration too, because my dad came from Mexico, and even though all my life he lived in the States, well, I knew that he wasn't from the States. He spoke perfect English, but I always knew he was from Mexico, and it was really beautiful just to really live this experience. My dad's no longer around, but all his family is, and they've really adopted me as just as if I had grown up here, and that's been really beautiful. But basically, it was just like little by little, because even before I could speak Spanish well, or just in that beginning stage, I remember finding. I just made a video about this yesterday, talking about Lao Shu, and I remember watching his videos and thinking, "This is so cool! Like, wow, I mean, it just amazing." And I'm like, oh man, I want to speak Spanish. And and I remember getting like some uh, CDs from groups that are like kind of legendary groups here in Mexico. And, I wanted to kind of like, since I'm such a big music fan, I wanted to start getting into some of the music. That helped. Um, I got a Mexican girlfriend, but this was about a year and a half, right around into my since arriving. And I'm going to admit something that's kind of like a language learning sin, but like in the beginning of the relationship, I kind of had the tendency to speak to her in English because I wasn't so confident in my Spanish. And when you have like a relationship, you know, with a girl who's not from the same country, you don't want to be like the bumbling idiot, right? You
Nah.
want to have some you kind of want to have some finesse. You want to be cool. So I defaulted to English, but at least when I would go to her house, it when I wasn't talking with her, I was speaking Spanish because you know her parents didn't speak English. Her brothers could, but thankfully they just spoke to me in Spanish, right? So
Yeah.
I did have like this initial thing, and I think one of the big changes for me, of course, just being there longer, you have more motivation to learn. But I have one really good friend in Mexico, and we did one thing that I think was one of the other key things to my Spanish transformation, which was to do regular language exchanges. Right, we would do 30 minutes English, 30 minutes Spanish, and we had this great list of topics, and we would go through them, and it really developed your ability to speak fluently. And it's really cool because you know I do classes online now, and one of the most popular classes, well, the most, is a class I call the Road to Fluency. And it's basically like the process that I went to really get this language and to be able to speak it, get it out of me. and I'm using the same questions. And it's really cool that I can use them with my students now, and they get on the road to fluency, and they go through through the stages, and they come out, speaking quite nicely. And this friend is very crucial for me in my story here because he we started speaking English when we met because he was actually training to be a teacher like how I was, right? But he did something that was just, I think he's a saint for this. I told him, man, we need to start speaking Spanish because look, I mean, look what I'm doing here, right? And it's not like it's not like the easiest thing in the world to find, English speaking friends, although it's possible here. But in your day-to-day life, it's probably not something you're going to come across too often. And he made this sacrifice to switch the language of communication to
Ah,
Spanish. And for me, that was like one of the main pivotal points in my journey as well, because um, that was like he was and is the main person that I talk to
mm,
here in Mexico. So, for me, that was a really beautiful gift.
sounds like a great friend. Because
Absolutely.
that's the thing. It's not easy to change once you have a relationship established in a language. It's very difficult to change the default language of conversation, especially if you're
100%.
still kind of. I don't know what your Spanish was like at the stage when this happened, but if you're not yet at an advanced level of proficiency, you go from being able to have conversations at a certain level of complexity. So all of a sudden, your conversations have to drop a little in complexity, or they have to take a lot longer to cover the same ground because you need to kind of give the person the time to think through what they want to say and things like that. So yeah, that sounds like a fantastic friend. That's also the dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, these things I listed, uh, are basically some of the main things that really changed my experience as a speaker of a language abroad or someone learning a language abroad. And eventually I did just start only speaking Spanish, I would say, like with that girlfriend, right? So that was also a process too, because even for her, like it was cool to date someone that spoke a different language, but like not so much to only ever speak in that language. She actually, I think, got tired of it, and then she just switched to Spanish, and that's the only language that she spoke to me in, right? So even when I would communicate with her in English, she would always respond to me in Spanish. So that's also, good help.
Yeah, it's cool when that happens. So yeah, you can fall into a kind of into a state where, for example, you might speak English because you're well. This is the thing. Often when we're speaking a language, we say, "Ah, my listening's way much better, so much better than my speaking," because speaking tends to lag kind of listening ability. But a way to kind of deal with that and have, if you have two people, a relationship between two people where they both have different native languages, but they both speak each other's languages, it's really cool how you can get the let someone max out on their kind of um speaking ability by speaking their native language and over here as well, but then you're still able to understand each other because your listening ability is quite good. So you have someone speaking Spanish
Uh
to someone and English back to the other. I've had conversations like that which are cool.
huh. Yeah. So yeah, it's been really nice because I have these two distinct experiences. One, learning a language in the environment of your target language. I want to say I did take classes like as Spanish as a second language, but I wasn't like one of those like book students. I basically used those classes just to listen and to partake, even though I didn't necessarily know it at the time. But basically me just sitting there listening to the Spanish, from the teacher, um, really helped, because there's people who are always like hitting the books, the Spanish textbooks, and I didn't really worry about that too much. So
Yeah, well, it's a question of learning style as well. I
well, a lot
like
of people don't even know like I mean, I was just starting to learn about the whole second language learning thing. So,
Mm.
most people don't have this interest, but they might want to learn a language. So they think, all right, well, if I go to the country, I enroll myself in a program, well, then that takes care of itself, and it can help a lot.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I mean, I'd almost go as far as to say is it's the foot in the door which can lead to other things, like what we've seen with you, for example. Then you,
Right.
yeah, you you go to the you say, oh, I'll go to the country and that'll help, and that's because you've got this intuitive kind of understanding that you go to the country that that brings along with it a lot of things. Like you end up meeting people, you end up having friends who you can with whom you can speak in the language, etc., etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew that my life was going to change. It wasn't necessarily about Spanish itself. I thought that it would be cool if I came out of it like bilingual, but it was more going from like a really dark experience and a very kind of down place, like basically the worst time of my life, to the complete opposite. Just me, in a way, getting a second chance at life again. And that's why like I take language, the whole language thing so seriously, because I see what it did for me on so many levels. um in a way, back home in the States, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I had a major that I didn't think I wanted to really pursue as a career. It was political science, by the way. um so I kind of discovered myself, the man I want to be, the life I want to have, how I want my life to be. And I learned all this here in Mexico, and Spanish was such a crucial part of that, because in most cases, in a lot of important situations, and just it was taking place through this language. And for me, I like to joke and say that the monolingual life is just something that can never be with me ever again, because I can't go back to a monolingual life. And when you have a language that's so part of your I was going to say DNA in a way, but it's like what a part of your soul. More, it's like a part of your soul, that could never cease to exist anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because it's
Yeah,
such
I
a
know
part of you.
exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. This is this is gonna sound like it's off topic, but it's gonna end up exactly on topic because this popped into my mind as you were speaking. Um, when I tell people I'm studying Chinese, sometimes their response is, "Oh, what are you gonna use that for?"
Mm.
And my my kind of quip response is developing into, "What do you use English for?" And I think that's just the essence of it, isn't it? It's
Mm.
you end up living through a language. It's not like any other discipline where it's like you learn how to be an engineer and then you use it in your professional workplace. Of
Right.
course, you learn any skill, it kind of seeps into other things and it develops you personally, etc. But language is a thing which is innately human and allows you to create a whole life. You live everything through language. And what you did,
Absolutely.
yeah, you went over to Mexico, and what you did is, I think what you did is possibly one of the best ways you can kind of create a relationship with the language, where you build such,
100%.
yeah, builds this such a strong connection with the language. I mean, these almost sound like platitudes because this is what we hear all the time. You want to not just study the language or connect with the language, but they're nevertheless so true. When you live so many
Absolutely.
experiences through the language and have so many relationships with the language, that's what makes that's what makes your interest and desire to keep interacting with it durable. And that's when you end up at
Of
insane
course.
levels of proficiency over the long term.
Yeah, and I mean, one of like one of the just like the criteria that I have in my mind of where I could relocate, like basically has to do with, is it a diverse place culturally? Because where I'm from in Ohio, it's like, I mean, it's not the most diverse place culturally in the world. I mean, my dad probably was like the only one who, I mean, one of the few people in my in my city who didn't have English as a native language. And he, like, I heard him speak Spanish maybe like a handful of times in my life. So, it's not like I grew up around this. Um, here's an interesting thing. My mom will, oh, my mom always said, "Oh, I wanted you kids to be bilingual. I tried to speak to you in Spanish, but I mean, your dad just spoke English and things like that. You could have been bilingual." And my Mexican family told me, "Oh, it was like a shame your dad didn't raise you with this language." And I think it's the complete opposite, because to have this experience from only speaking one language literally was just earth-shattering, beautiful, and life-changing. That had I come here speaking Spanish, my experience would have been completely different. But I'm not. I really don't think it would have been as big. So just the idea of coming here, just knowing basic Spanish, like from school, high school, and college, which no one really speaks Spanish after an experience like that,
Yeah.
to have this like transformation for me, just like with anything in life, it's not about the results. And I mean, it is about the results, but it's more about the process. And here's one thing that you and I really share that, I mean, probably not going to relate to with many other people, about like these two things, like my three passions my three passions that I've had in my life: running, music, and language. And I was a serious runner. I know, like, you were too. So um, it's all very interesting. You understand the beauty of putting the work in daily. You understand the beauty of the process, not so much the result. Of course, you want the results, but you know that it's all about the process.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I find that really interesting as well. You don't regret being raised monolingual, because
No,
it allowed you to have the experience as an adult of going to your kind of heritage country and learning it all and being exposed to that world at a critical kind of period, a critical growth period.
critical for me. It's one of the greatest gifts of my life. Um, maybe the greatest gift in my life. Well, let's say, I mean, besides having just a completely amazing, wonderful father, something for me that makes me really emotional and grateful was the fact that my uncle, his brother, like, took me in and gave me this direction. And without that, God knows where I'd be. And I feel grateful because I had this new life, a life that I could be happy with, after such you know a tragedy. And I try to live a good life. I try I try to be my best self. It's a process, and it's something that I work with every single day. But I was given a chance. To give you like a running metaphor, I consider this whole thing like to have a father, to have children. It's like your father, your family, however you want to put it, try to get you in the best possible position in a race, to give you the baton so you can have the best chance to succeed. And I feel that my dad filled me with these things that I need. He passed me the baton, and then now I have it. Now I have to do the next, and then I have to do it again for the next generation, my son, or whoever is in my care.
That's beautiful, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. Wow.
But that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't get a little help from my uncle. So it was a really special thing.
Yeah. I mean, for you, it really sounds like your language learning experience is like it's it's so intertwined with your personal journey that it's just
Mm.
it's inseparable. Which,
Right.
yeah,
So I mean, in my 20s, I used to think, man, it's really cool. These people that found kind of what they want to do for the rest of their life. I was fortunate enough to find a passion in my teens and to really pursue it. And you know, I took it respectably far. I was a D1 runner. I mean, do you know D1?
Division 1.
Uh, I don't know if they have some kind of different standards there, but I mean, I wasn't. I wasn't amazing, but I was definitely a respectable guy.
What did you run?
And I did track, but I was always more of like a cross guy. I love cross country.
Yeah.
That was really my thing. I loved it. Just distance running in general. I thought that I was going to be a marathoner after my collegiate running career, but I had to make a decision. What do I do? I started writing at the time, poetry, and I thought the lyrics were quite good. And I said, well, I can continue with this running thing, or I could follow this path, learn the guitar and do all that. And that's what I did. I was at a point where I achieved something that was, quite nice. A long story short, I wanted to run for this university. My first year of college, they had their team kind of already determined. There was a cross country coach and there was a track coach, but the track coach was had all the power. But the cross country coach, I knew that he could kind of relate to me because this team was formed of guys who were more or less as good as me, maybe a little better. In some cases, maybe I was better, from a high school perspective, but I knew that they were all blue collar guys like me. They weren't like straight studs from high school, state champions. These guys were respectable guys, but guys that, were really working for it. And I really related kind of how I was as a runner to these guys. And I really wanted to be a part of this team. So the cross coach told me that, come along, train with the guys, and I'm sure next year some spots will open up, and if you make it, you make it. So I did. But for some reason, the track coach, I don't know, he thought that I don't know, wasn't good enough to run for the team or whatever, or whatever. He basically didn't allow me to come to practice anymore. And that broke my heart because, I saw my dreams slipping away, but I don't give up so easily. So I trained all by myself that year. I came back and I got on the team. I was the newcomer of the year. 2 years later, I was the number one runner on that team, So that 2 years later, I was the number one runner on that team. And I remember having a moment where it was at the Ohio State championship meets. And that was my first race where I was number one for my university. And I remember how surreal it was because I saw literally 9 years of dedication come together in one moment. I started running when I was 13 and I had this moment at 22. I just walked off and kind of kneeled or just sat down and thought, wow, look what I did, and I kind of keep that same mentality about everything. I think life and running, you could say language learning, but for me, running taught me about life. Every aspect. It taught me, you have to try really hard and work really hard. You're going to have setbacks. Things are not going to go exactly how you want them to go. You have to get over that and keep on going. And one day you'll have your day, And I was reminded about that recently because I've been recording monthly Russian progress videos and 30-minute recordings of my conversations and my speaking sessions, and I just did the one for 2 years. And I had this moment in mind for quite some time. I'm like, oh, here's my 2-year thing. I want to show how cool I speak Russian, how good I am, or not. I mean, not how good I am, but what I can do. I know my limitations at the moment.
How far you've come. You're like, this was going to be
how far I've come.
I've hit my 2 years. Look at where I've made it to. Yep.
Right. But I've been doing a speaking session with a different person every month. I feel
like I know where this is going.
Exactly. And let's just say it wasn't what I planned what I hoped it would be. Like I said, um, I think I battled it out, but it wasn't like the glory road that I was hoping that it would be. Just to be like, oh yes, this was my 2 year video. Look how it went, you know? Because actually, some previous videos were pretty good. And if those were my 2 year videos, and maybe it would have been like, oh, look how it turned out. But it actually inspired me because I was reminded of the whole setback thing, you know, like how we experience as runners, and you know, the only answer to that is to keep on going, and you'll have your day.
Yeah, definitely. I've always felt the same way about running. I don't it's not even like you consciously are thinking about these things. Oh, you have setbacks, you just keep on going. It's because I suppose at a certain level everyone understands these things because they're almost common sense, because they're they're built in our kind of idioms. Get up one more time, then you fall down, all of these things. It's part of our language, it's part of our kind of collective way of thinking and the wisdom we have. But the thing is, the way from actually living it through something like running, where you're forced to rock up to training every day. If you miss a bit of training, it shows itself later on the track when you're running. Just by living it and living these pure kind of fundamental principles, kind of enacting them in something which is so fundamental but so powerful, that builds itself into your intuition in a way which is almost in just, yeah, I can't articulate it, but later on when you're going and coming to new disciplines, that that kind of fundamental wisdom has been integrated into your kind of operating manual. So like when you go to then go
Right.
study a language, you're like,
It's in
all
your
right,
psyche.
exactly. It's like, all right, what's the plan? What's the training session plan? When am I going to do the training
Hmm.
sessions? When's the race?
Exactly.
And then when things don't go your way, you're like, all right, is there something I could have done better in training? What's going on? You kind of, you know what I mean? It just becomes a part of you,
Of course.
definitely.
Yeah. To to analyze your study methods when you think it's right to switch out something, you know, replace it with something. That's also like an interesting thing that I know I've wanted to make a video about, but I haven't like clarified all my thoughts. But the general idea is like, as a language learner, you have to know when to call it a day with something, you know, and maybe not necessarily do something just for the sake of it, you know. Like I used a podcast, a Russian podcast, and I use it for quite a bit. But it's like a reoccurring thing. They do it every week. But just because I have this really nice resource there doesn't mean that's like I need to follow that like to the end, however long that may be. You know, I think I've gotten a lot of use out of it, and you know, maybe some of it's like lost its charm a bit, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to blindly keep doing the same thing just because there's another episode coming out and that's what you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get that.
Exactly.
So, what are you doing now? Like at this very point in time,
Right.
specifically in
Um,
terms of language learning.
um, I'm at this weird stage where I'm trying to reinstill these habits, at least with Russian, that I had through a large part of last year. Right, the end of last year and the beginning of this year, you know, you kind of become more lenient in some aspects. You know, you've got these festive dates and such, and maybe you let yourself slide a bit. And basically, I'm just trying to get back to where I was. You know, I have this kind of idea of what I want to do as far as my studies are concerned, and I'm just basically little by little chopping back at it, trying to build these things up. And you know, I want to do a good amount of study or language work this year, and I'm basically trying to put myself in a position where I can, you know, do all those things. Right.
Yeah, because I was watching a video of yours and you were saying you were doing quite a few hours last year, and now
Mm.
it's kind of you're still doing a couple of hours, but you're like of active study. You're like it could be 3 instead of 2, and then you just feel like you're progressing that little bit faster. I think you said
Right, right.
3 hours of Russian and 1 hour of Spanish would have been, if that could happen, that would be like ideal this year. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, yeah. That would be like exactly ideal for me. 3 hours of Russian, 1 hour of Spanish. But to kind of build that Russian thing back in place, my Spanish is taking the hits, and when I build that Russian back up, I can incorporate the Spanish. Towards the second part of the year, I was about at that hour a day mark, and for me, that's I think all I need right now, because I'm actively learning Russian as like the main thing. I have to really get that language in me, so that's why the differential is quite like that. And yeah, for me that would be ideal. Maybe last year I was doing 2 hours active, 1 hour passive, something like that, which I think is a nice amount over a period of time. Like that's nice. I mean,
Yeah.
I know some people think you got to study like 1,000,000 hours a day, but for me, it's like I've got language learning is my main passion, but I mean, there's other areas of my life I'm trying to improve at,
Yeah.
improving too. You know what I
Ah,
mean? So
and if you spent more hours studying language learning, it'd be detrimental. You know what I mean? It would have a
absolutely,
net negative effect, not just on language learning.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
I was
That's
telling my friend just that, like, I wouldn't really even want to study much more than 3 hours a day, because it's like you got other things too.
yeah. And then it starts kind of eating at the passion a little, and you start
And
feeling
I don't want that.
yeah, you don't want that. You want to maintain that passion over the long term, and you got to be careful. You got to kind of nurture the flame,
It's a fine line, exactly.
fuel it just the right amount. You know what I mean?
Completely agree. That I have that in mind as well,
So,
because
mm,
as a distance runner, I
yeah,
think, well, it's a distance game, not a sprint,
yeah. Well, that's exactly it. You don't want to burn out. Like you don't want to get overtrained. The same thing
Right.
happens. I mean, in running, it's maybe a little bit more kind of innately physical, but for the people listening who aren't runners, what can happen with running is you actually overtrain. And there are like two kind of instances of that. Like one's acute, like you're in a training session for that week, you've worked too hard, you've done too many hard sessions, you've been on the track too many times, you've been running in spikes, which are shoes which put a lot of kind of pressure on places. And maybe in one session, you get kind of an acute instance of overtraining where you're like, you get injured. But then there's overtraining over the long term, which is you've trained too hard, you haven't given yourself enough breaks, and it can result in kind of psychological fatigue where you just completely lose the passion and you don't want to run anymore. And then also like physical lethargy where you all of a sudden this actually happens. Like you've been running really well, but you've just never given yourself a break. And then all of a sudden your performance starts declining because your body's just like had it. So, yeah. So we're carefully watching out for that in our language learning.
Yeah. I mean, because it would be nice to say, oh, yeah, I want to study this language 8 hours a day. For most people, it's not feasible, but even if it were, you would have to keep in mind this aspect, which is, again, not talked about so much.
Yeah. I actually I actually never want language learning to be my main activity in my life.
Really? What would be your main activity now?
University.
Hmm.
Um well, see, I shouldn't say never, but the reason that idea came to mind is because my the way I learned to study languages was my language learning strategy was kind of born out of the environment in which I first started learning languages, which is while I was insanely busy at school during my final
Hmm.
couple of years and doing my running and trying to graduate with a really high score in my high school diploma, that kind of thing. So the way I've kind of learned to study languages was born out of that environment. So there's also an element of that. Maybe I don't know how to study languages effectively full time, but also for kind of these reasons of burnout. I really like the idea of being able to study a language for an hour or a couple of hours a day and then just have all this other stuff which I'm also doing. I almost feel like if I was doing I can have periods of time where I'm doing more, like on holidays, and I can like do a lot. but in kind of over the long term, I don't mind the idea of always having a major project, but still every time I'm commuting on public transport, I'm listening to doing some passive exposure. And then every time in the morning, maybe I'm like doing 30 minutes or an hour, but I'm never doing 8 hours a day unless it's like holidays, I'm in the country, or it's a specific period of time where I'm doing that, like your 40 hours, 7-day
40.
challenge.
I was just gonna throw that in there. What a perfect
segue. I want to hear about that, and I've watched your YouTube video explaining it, but I think it's something which is a really cool idea. It's really interesting, and I think other people who are listening to this and haven't heard of this, Mark has what you call your 40-hour, 7-day learning challenge, and I think it's an idea worth sharing. Language challenge. I've mislabeled your
Please, I'm very serious about this stuff. Come on. This is my baby. I worked out the hashtag. I put the capitals and everything, made it right. So please get it right. Show some.
I've been corrected. I've been corrected. All right. So tell us about it. Your language challenge.
Man. All right. So this is basically it. When I started learning Russian right at the beginning of 2019, I told myself, Mark, learn Russian for a year and a half, and at the end of that year and a half, reward yourself with a trip to Russia, right? And the idea would be that I would stay there like a month, and I would just go hardcore with my Russian studies, try to get as, much benefit out of that time as essentially humanly possible. But, last year the apocalypse struck, so that wasn't quite possible. But I had this idea of, all right, well, it's clear that I'm not going to be going to Russia this year. I've been taking like vacations that last only a week long because, I do like my job, and so for me, I don't feel like I need to be away from it long periods of time. But what if I study my language full time, or just be with my language full time? It's like creating the idea was almost like, basically like living in an apartment in Moscow. You can recreate that. I live in an apartment in Mexico City, but for 1 week I turned it into an apartment in Moscow, and man, it's just such an amazing experience, because it's the second best thing to actually having that. And I'm not going to say it's the best thing, although you could make the argument for that you can actually get more language, time doing this than being in the country.
Yeah.
But, I think, of course, emotional connection, meeting the people and being with them is very, very, very important. And but anyway, if you can't do that, I think this is the second best thing you can do. 40-hour, 7-day language challenge. And you can choose to do with that time as you see fit, So my only main idea was to have as many hours of active language time as possible. So I think I did maybe, I think like 6 days of the week, I did 30 hours of passive listening, just because, I was washing the dishes, doing a little cleaning, all that. And then I think the last day I had like an hour and a half. But, for other than that, it was just me focused with the language, spending real quality time with the language. And, I had speaking sessions practically every day. I was getting the time to explore albums, listen to this music, watch series, movies, just really connecting with the language. And it really does feel like a vacation. And I would really love to do it again sometime very soon.
Yeah, only people in this community would be like 40 hours of language exposure. Just feels like a vacation, man.
Yeah, it felt like a vacation in my apartment in Moscow, like my Airbnb in Moscow or something.
Yeah. But I like the idea. It's like you decide this week I'm gonna find the time to get as much of 40 hours of active time as possible, and I'll top the rest up with kind of passive exposure. It's just like you go
Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna 1 week I'm gonna just go ham and set aside that the opportunity for that to happen.
yeah, it's more like make the time because you
Yeah,
know I do more than 30 hours a week of teaching. So I mean, I had to take that equation out and just once I had that bit of time, well, then it was just a matter of doing what I needed to do, and you could do it.
yeah. Because otherwise, it's like it's so easy in our lives to just keep on being busy all the time. But I suppose the challenge forces you to go, okay, this week I'm gonna make the time, set aside the time to do something special.
Yeah, and it's got like a bit of a cult following on the internet. I would like to see it get a little bit bigger because it's just something that's, I don't know, really, really cool. And I know I just get so much joy out of it. And
I'm
well,
gonna
it's
have to
always
try it at
there.
some point. I'll have to try it and share my experience with you. I'll have a think
Well,
about when. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to plan it. That's the thing. You have to make sure you have that time because if you have the time and you know you're going to, have that availability, it's not the hardest thing in the world to get the hours, but you got to make sure that time's kind of like, auctioned off.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny that we segued onto this after talking about not wanting to burn out and do too much a day. But I suppose the key thing is this is a kind of first of all, it's novel in the sense that
Hmm.
it's the fact that it's exciting and something new, which you only do every now and then, gives extra kind of an extra injection of motivation for that week.
Of course.
And I almost feel like I almost feel like it's kind of almost, even though you're doing so much in a short period of time, it's almost like an anti-burnout activity because you have this one kind of sprint period where you get the opportunity to kind of satisfy that urge of working really hard for a period of time, feeling like you're making a lot of progress. Um, but then also you're not constantly having the foot on the pedal and doing that all the time. You kind of afterwards, did you find at the end you were a little bit like, I need to back off a little, or what was it like?
um, Not necessarily because of the time, but I I would tell you my fatal flaw as a language learner is when I experience like this like something that I know to be like really good, like a really good achievement. I have a tendency just to like, all right, well, let me just take it easy a couple of days, as opposed to just jumping right back into it. So if it was more so for that as opposed to me needing to take some kind of time just due to the volume that I did.
Right, you're like, okay, I get that. I get that. It's
It's
like
just
the
like it's sulk in your victory, just
yeah.
enjoy it for a bit.
But if you wanna really reach mastery, you got to be like, you'll see the elite sports people. You know, they'll win. Nadal will win the French Open, and the next day you'll see him on the courts in the morning. He'll be there. You know what I mean? That
Exactly.
yeah, and that's why they win the championships.
Hmm.
So I suppose we can keep that mentality with our language learning, and we'll go far.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not perfect, but oh well.
Nah, we I haven't done any language learning for well, this I haven't done any active language learning for a couple of days. But this is a cool
Mm,
thing. If you make the languages a part of your life, it's almost impossible not to do something. For example, when I say I haven't been doing anything, well, I've been texting people in the
mhm.
language. So, you know what I mean? But
Of course. I mean,
yeah,
yeah. I did this video talking about how passive listening was saving my language learning. And if I can't get active time of reading or listening or watching something and paying attention or whatever it may be, I know I can listen to my target language when I'm washing the dishes, when I go to the store, whatever it may be. So um, that kind of also makes it so I don't feel like overly bad, you know,
yeah.
that I know I'm getting that language in.
So when you're actually sitting down and doing active study, what are you doing?
Mhm.
This is the thing. We often talk at a kind of abstracted away level, but let's go from the macro to the micro. You've just sat down and you just, let's say you want to study Russian.
Mhm.
What do you do?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's talking about what I did through time, but basically it's like, um, you know, I try to do some more. I try to do a nice mix of comprehensible things with things that are above my level, or listening to things of all kind of um, uh, like levels. Like I can listen to things that are like maybe meant for an A2 student, do things meant for an A2 student, or try to push myself something that's kind of more native style content, you know. I've always been more of like a kind of comprehensible input kind of guy, but last year I started adding like elements of like, I guess what's called like the whole, I don't know, immersion movement, but I never got on like full with that. But I mean, I just adapted to how I like it as a language learning. I just like literally do it how I like it, you know.
Mm.
Like what I mean by that, the one thing that I do that is more kind of like lends to the whole immersion camp or whatever is that I will spend time, let's say 5 days a week, um, spending a certain amount of time of watching something, and really paying attention, something like native, like, you know, TV series without subtitles. But, you know, just to really develop that listening and get it going. But I'm more likely to use the rest of that time that I have to dedicate to language learning for more comprehensible stuff. So it's really like this fine mix of you know, doing this comprehensible thing, building myself up, and then doing like these sprinkles of this immersion style, right?
Well, see, this is interesting because even in the language learning community, there are sort of I don't want to say camps because it's not like there's division, but there are different
No, kind of, it
styles.
kind of is. I feel that way. I feel that way. Like, and that's, I've always been so careful about like speaking about this immersion thing, because like my language, like, sure, I take a bit from everyone, but I'm not like in a camp, you know what I mean? So I like, I typically haven't even like to use that word because I don't want to be thrown into a camp. But you know, if I'm going to explain what my learning style is, it would be like mainly like comprehensible input with like outer edges of this kind of immersion kind of ideas, you know?
Okay. See, that's interesting because see, it sounds like you're not even. It sounds like you're completely structuring and leading your own learning, where plenty of people get a formal resource and they work their way through it, and a lot of them are very grammar focused, for example. But have you ever worked through a formal language textbook? Like
Um,
outside of when you're learning autodidactically, when you're on your
yeah.
own, not in a classroom. Have you?
With Russian, no, you know, I did a video of me showing my progress after a year and a half of learning Russian, but without grammar. And you know, that video I actually was proud of. You know how like I wanted my 2 year video to be. That was like wow, look at me! Like I was so happy with what I could do. Like for example, in that video. But I am thinking about, you know, I want to start adding a little bit more um, like gram grammar knowledge to the table and all that. But up until now, I really haven't done any. You know, so um,
So
I've done like, let's say I've worked through like Asimil the book, or like, you know, then like teach
have you?
yourself, then like link, yes, but I don't consider that like traditional language learning because it's not
Mm.
exercise, it's dialogue
Mm-hmm.
and audio. So you know, I built myself up like that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm curious and I'm kind of asking about this because I also kind of like getting a lot of comprehensible input, but you can't. It's very difficult to just kind of start with that. You need some sort of leg up to launch yourself to the level where you can then just give yourself a lot of input and let your brain process and identify patterns. You need kind of an entry key to open the door, and once the door's open, you can go, all right, I'm going to run around in here.
Right.
But if you haven't got the key, you're just like body slamming the door for a while, and eventually you'll break it down. But I feel like it's not the most efficient way of entering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'll find something which is some form of input, something you're to read, watch, or listen to, and you'll do active study and intensive kind of processing of that language.
Mm-hmm.
That's what is that form the body of your kind of study sessions?
Yes, these comprehensive type things, it forms the body. I would say maybe like, all right, if we're not counting passive listening, which is, I would say maybe it's like 75% these kind of things, then 25% this kind of like immersion style thing, right? Right now, you can make things that are more natural, more comprehensive. For example, like one of the things I really want to do this year, because Russian literature, is really hard, and of course, like nonfiction would be better. But one thing that I'm really interested to do this year is just to take like scripts or of just like the text from TV series and just read those, and do a kind of simultaneous thing of like reading, then listening, and trying to like just boost that comprehensibility. And for those kind of things, I use something like Link. It helps, or it's a way to make something harder not so hard,
Yeah. You can punch above your weight if you have the right resources. Yeah. Link
Absolutely.
is good for that. I haven't used it much, but I have used it. And it's not like I haven't used it much because I don't want to use it. It's just the time has never been kind of, I've just never fallen into it yet. I feel like I will, and it'll become a resource I use more and more. It's just, for example, at the moment, what I'm doing with Chinese at university is there's a textbook series that we're working through. So it just makes sense for me because I'm doing Chinese at university through a diploma. So it makes sense for me to follow there, because at the beginner level, anything works. In my opinion, to kind of open the door and get that foundation. I think like the biggest sin in language learning is not using the wrong method. It's just not doing anything. I feel like if you're doing something and you're moving, that's almost 80% of the way there.
100%. And when I was starting with this whole Russian thing, I kind of I didn't set like these huge goals in terms of what I wanted to study. My main goal basically for the first, say, 5 months or so of my Russian was literally just to, it was like to do 25 minutes of the Asimov book a day, basically, until I finished that. I could do other activities, but that's what I really needed to do every day. And what it did is it formed that habits. And since I did that, it's just such an inculcated thing in my life. It's just one of those things that I have to do.
I genuinely feel like that's the best way to start. Pick a beginner resource, start to finish, build the habit of actually studying the language.
Of course. And you don't even have to do it how they instruct you to do it.
Exactly.
Because, I got interested in the Luca method, like at the beginning of it, and basically it seemed like a very effective method, but you have to repeat a bit. And I don't know, for me, I'm just like, what? I'm just going to do 25 minutes of this, and I'm just going to go through the book. Like, I think I would do a lesson a day. And let's say that it took me like 15 minutes to do the lesson, to get through it. And I approached it from different angles. But after I did that lesson, I spent, let's say, the next 10 minutes just reviewing and listening to the lessons I previously did, and I basically just did a lesson a day. You know, I did those basically 5 days a week, and then on Saturdays I was going to a Russian conversation group, which I really had no business to be in it, but I just went there to be a part of where the language was spoken, and just listen basically. And Sundays was kind of like my cultural day where I would watch a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was my beginning routine for the first 5 or so months.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the thing. It takes time. 5 months, and kind of if you're serious about language learning and you're learning a language, and it's a lifetime of learning that language. 5 months,
Of
it's
course,
like build a foundation. And
of course.
yeah,
Step one.
step one, get the concrete foundation in, and then the house won't fall down in 5 years when you haven't built. You know what I mean? Go slow at the beginning to go further in a more durable way over the long term.
Of course, at least to have the potential to do so.
Yeah,
If
well,
I
I'll be watching. I'll be eagerly following your progress and your journey.
Right. So it's like if I studied an hour a day, this is funny, like if I studied an hour a day of anything throughout my life, like that would be like quite a bit for me. And now when I study like 1 hour, it feels like I didn't do much, but I know that, you know, if my bad days are around an hour, I don't consider it too bad. But I do try to reach for a bit more, but at the same time, I'm trying to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. An hour a day goes a long way.
Absolutely, it all adds up.
So, I mean, speaking of long term, what speaking of the long term, what are you thinking is on the horizon? More languages, or
I would, I
filling
would,
up
I would
in?
like to think so. I would like to. I mean, I would like to think so, but um, I had the idea of learning Russian permeating for years. You know, so for me, it was very clear that I wanted to do that. Right now, there isn't like a necessarily like if I were to just tell you what would be the language I would study, I would kind of tell you it would be Mandarin, because I like the idea of learning languages from a different language family. I am interested in China. I think it would be cool. But at the same time, these things need to develop organically, and maybe that will come about organically. But I can't tell you about what the next the next language would be for sure. When I was studying just Spanish, I knew without a shadow of a doubt it was going to be Russian. So I'm still so engulfed in this whole Russian thing.
Why,
And
actually?
mm, well, I used to say that I used to kind of just throw it off and say that basically it was because I had a friend from Ukraine and a friend from Russia in college, and they would speak together, and that's the first time I really heard it. And maybe that's where somehow subconsciously my interest was piqued. But I think it's first of all a beautiful sounding language. I love the mixture of soft and hard sounds that just flows within that language, just like that. I think Russia is an interesting place. It's one of those places, in a way, like Mexico, where people think that they know what it's like or what the people are like, but they really don't know. And it's also nice to have this like uncovering of what it really is, not just like what you've been told it is. And of course, there's that the only thing that people really know about Russia, if you're American, is just like the whole Soviet Union thing, and then later Putin, but that's just about it. So
Yeah.
it's nice to get into these things that people don't really know about, and discover it for yourself, and you know what it's about. So it's like, if people want to talk to me about Mexico or and what Mexicans are like I would have to give it to them very fast, because like if they're getting out of the line, it's just like, you don't even know. So why are you talking? And Russia, to an extent, I feel, it's just like this entity that exists, and at least from a Western perspective, an American perspective, even European or Australian, I assume, it's just like this big entity, and it's very mysterious, but you don't know so much about it. You kind of have an idea, it has this mystique, but so these are some general ideas. But now that you know, I do teach online, and I've had a lot of Russian students, and they're just generally really great people, and this just takes your wants to learn this language to a whole new level. Your
Yeah.
desire, because you've come in contact with the people, and even if it's in a different language, deep down these are good people, and you want to speak to them in their language one day too. So these
Yeah.
also help. These things also help.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a little hard to even kind of linearize your thoughts and lay it out like that. This is why, this is why. All of the things that you just kind of talk to sit in your mind intuitively, and you're like, I think Russian's the next one. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like if someone forces you to kind of think about it, you can maybe like put together some of the reasons, but really it just sits there and you just have a feeling sometimes.
Right. And you know I think in a way this has helped my long-term motivation. I think that's the whole setting a small goal to study a specific time a day throughout the week was really beneficial for me, extremely. But also me sitting with the idea that this is something that I would like to do well before I did it, I think also gave way to my success, or whatever little bit of success I've had so far, my ability to maintain motivation. It was just a nice little touch. I'm not saying it's 100% necessary, but I definitely recognize how that might have its importance there.
Yeah. And the other thing you were saying about being out talking about kind of a place having a mystique, but you learn the language and you get a backdoor access or a more natural, native, authentic access to that world. And I totally agree with that. I've been finding that with Chinese, for example, kind of the language barrier kind of can create that mystique because you're the only way you can view that world is via your own linguistic environment. But all of a sudden, for example, with me, all of a sudden, if my Chinese is getting better, I'm able to talk with the people from that place and form one-on-one relationships with the people from that place, no kind of filter. But then also, I'm on like Chinese TikTok watching the videos which are there. I'm on Chinese, you know what I mean? So all of those things,
Of
it's the
course.
same with any language. Russian, for
Oh,
example.
absolutely. And right now is a really interesting time because I'm trying to watch a bit of the news that's going on, try to keep up with what's happening. Basically, there's this guy who is Putin's opposition, and there's like this whole thing going on about what's going to happen, like with this guy. Apparently, it seemed like he was poisoned, and he blamed the Kremlin, and then you know he survived this assassination attempt, and then he went to Germany, and then he flew back to Russia, where he was immediately arrested, and now they're having all these kind of protests. Like it's just like, you know, I think it's just amazing to be able to kind of experience history while it's happening. It kind
Mm,
of would be like if you were studying English now, to observe what's happening in the United States, like the taking of the Capitol, like all this tension that
yeah.
has been created. For me, I'm experiencing this kind of thing with Russia, um, and even before with some other things. Like Belarus was going through its own situation to an extent. It is, and it's really nice to be able to partake in that. And you're one with the language, and you're one with history. So I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, really cool. I agree. I definitely agree. That's the thing. Like people are like, what are you gonna do with this language? It's like, how can you in the 30 seconds that you have to respond to that question start talking about how you have the opportunity to access another world and follow history through a authentic lens in the moment. You know what I mean? You just can't. So
Incredible,
yeah, that's
incredible.
why I'm developing the quip. What do you do with English?
So I mean, if I would say like my final piece to or my final message to anyone that's considering learning a language, that is learning a language, is literally, it's a noble pursuit, and you never know where it's going to take you. You know, you never know. For me, it's just like, it's really so amazing, and the doors that can open for you that you didn't even know ever existed are there for the taking, for beautiful experiences to be had. You know, like to touch on what I said about Spanish. I felt like I found myself as a man. You know, I experienced love and, you know, development just in my thoughts and all kinds of things. And you know, you start learning a language and you don't know where it can take you. Um, and it's a wonderful journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Mark. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I've honestly, this has been a really interesting conversation. It's been lovely hearing about your experiences.
Thank you
I,
so much.
I before we completely wrap up though, I do want to chat with you in Spanish for a little while, just for a bit of fun.
Okay.
So, for now, we'll leave the English speaking audience behind. So, to everyone who doesn't speak Spanish and doesn't want to hang around for this portion, then thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. But ahora en español.
Bueno.
Bueno.
Está bien.
Pero como he dicho antes, creo que tu español va a ser mejor que el mío.
Bueno, pues no hay problema, es natural. Llevo
Es
mucho tiempo viviendo en México.
sí, sí. De verdad, pienso que el español mexicano probablemente es un español al cual
Ujú.
estoy un poco acostumbrado,
¿De verdad? Oh, qué bueno.
porque mi amiga con quien hago mi intercambio lingüístico
Ujú.
es de México.
Ah, qué bueno. ¿De qué parte?
De Piedras Negras,
Mm,
al lado de Texas.
mm, ok. Ah, hacia el norte, entonces.
Sí, tal, pero al mismo tiempo me necesita mucha práctica también con
Ujú.
el español mexicano.
Pues bueno.
Con el español en general, pero también con el
Ujú.
español mexicano.
Pues sería bueno. Es el dialecto más hablado de todo el mundo, hispanohablante, digamos, porque pues la población de México pues es algo grande, y aquí en Ciudad de México pues es el lugar en el que se habla más español que en cualquier otra parte del mundo. O sea, Ciudad de México es una ciudad enorme. Entonces, el español de aquí se llama, pues, el chilango. La gente de Ciudad
Chilango.
de México se llaman los chilangos. Y pues el dialecto de la ciudad, así se le dice, es chilango. Entonces, a mí me gusta mucho ese español. Y pues bueno, yo creo que como cada país tiene lo suyo, pero aquí como pienso que es algo muy chido el español. Chido quiere decir, ¿no?, padre,
Qué
que quiere
padre.
decir cool, que quiere decir genial, bueno.
Sí,
O sea, las cosas que dicen acá son chido, está chido eso. Es como, qué padre.
qué
Son
padre.
las dos como palabras más clásicas para decir cool.
Sí,
Y yo creo que el español mexicano por lo general es algo muy chido, y el acento de acá y pues el español de México, de Ciudad de México, a mí me fascina. Eh, es algo con mucho estilo, me gusta.
sí. Y en los Estados Unidos, la mayor parte,
Ujú.
la mayor parte de hispanohablantes, ¿ellos son mexicanos o no? ¿Sabes?
Diría que sí, sí. Am, la mayoría sí, pero obviamente hay muchos
Ah,
cubanos, puertorriqueños, venezolanos, colombianos, pero a lo mejor sabes que una gran parte de Estados Unidos antes era México. Entonces es
mm,
natural que personas de descendencia mexicana pues viven allá, ¿no? Porque pues es su tierra a final de cuentas.
sí.
Entonces sí, hay muchos como pues, mexicanos allá y pues
También al
Azor,
sur del país es
uh-huh.
directamente al lado, entonces es normal que hay mucha
Claro.
gente viendo de
Sí, o
México.
sea, toda esa parte antes era México. Entonces, con
Sí, sí,
razón, hay tantas
de
personas
verdad,
ahí
sí,
de...
sí.
Ujú,
Entonces es normal que mucha gente queda
bastante, sí.
allá. Sí, sí, sí.
Eso sí. Entonces, ¿no haces nada hoy en día para practicar tu español o qué?
Ah, no estudio de una manera activa, pero
Ujú,
a veces hablo con mi amiga de México, a
qué bueno.
veces cuando estoy en el autobús,
Ujú.
ah, yendo de mi casa a cualquier lugar. am, Normalmente en ese tiempo estoy escuchando un podcast en español o una cosa de como eso, pero no estudio de una manera activa.
Sí, o sea, es impresionante la cantidad de países que hablan ese idioma. O sea, hasta en África hay un país que se habla español.
¿Qué país? ¿Qué país es? ¿Cuál
Em,
país?
eh,
No te recuerda.
sí,
¿No ves?
es ecuatoriana algo. Eh,
Es
bueno,
en, en África. Se dice como eso. África.
se llama em,
El país se llama.
Guinea Ecuatorial.
Sí, sí. Porque hay Guinea en África y también
Ujú.
en Suramérica. Hay los
Mm,
dos, sí. Sí,
ok.
ok. Creo que sí.
O sea, sí, o sea, el español es algo muy chido. En México, en Colombia, o sea, de
En todas las
Venezuela,
partes.
de
Creo.
Argentina, todos tienen su estilo. Y
Sí. Creo que
así me encanta.
el español es la, la, el idioma, el tercero más hablado idioma en el mundo. Creo.
¿Sí?
Más o menos depende de que
Como,
hablas
como
solamente de hablantes nativos o...
en ese caso, el español sería en segundo lugar.
Ok,
Hay más nativos del español que, pues, hay nativos del inglés. Entonces,
sí,
eso te dice algo.
sí,
Hay que aprender el
exactamente.
español porque, pues, hay muchísimas personas que lo hablan.
Sí, y sabía eso cuando empecé a aprender el español. Es una de las razones por las cuales he empezado a aprenderlo.
Es muy buena razón, o sea, porque ya hablamos inglés. Entonces, con el español, leí que con esas dos lenguas se puede, pues, puedes comunicarte con un
Muchas, mucha gente.
como 80, por ciento del mundo. O sea,
Un
con esos
gran
dos
por ciento.
idiomas
Sí.
es bastante.
Y también ahora que aprendo el chino,
Pues sí, con
es...
eso como casi hablas con todo el mundo. Puedes hablar con todo el mundo.
Sí, mucha gente que es... Y eso es una razón u una razón,
Es una
¿sabes?
razón,
Una razón. Ok.
razón.
Eso es una razón. am, ah, una grande razón por la cual estudio idiomas es porque me gusta hablar con personas, otras
Pues sí,
personas. Entonces, es normal que estudio los idiomas que son más hablados. Son los idiomas más hablados en el mundo.
pues tiene mucho sentido. O sea, para mí es la razón principal para aprender un idioma extranjero, para poder hablar con la gente. Es lo máximo. Y pues, al final de cuentas, no,
Sí,
es lo que me gusta.
sí. El otro día era en un café ah, ah, comiendo y tomando un poco con una amiga y allá había unos colombianos
Ajá.
y al final ah, he terminado la noche allá hablando
Mm.
con ellos
No,
y
wow, wow.
ah, puedes ver que hablar un idioma te permite de haber esas tipas de experiencias. Ver a,
Pues sí.
ver a alguien en un café hablando un otro idioma, puedes ir a introducirte, pues hablar un poco, conocer a gente. También había un jardinario, alguien con el
Mm.
alguien quien hace cosas en el jardín.
Jardinero.
Jardinero, ok. Había un jardinero a, a la casa de mis abuelas, quien
Mm.
era argentino,
Ah,
y pues era hablando con él. Era, el acento argentino es un poco raro, pero
mm.
me gusta.
No, me gusta bastante ese acento y cuando escuchas los acentos de los demás que hablan en español, todos saben que el español argentino es como tiene su propio estilo. Dicen que es como casi como si fueran italianos la manera en la que hablan el español.
Mm,
Es como... "Oh, tengo un amigo argentino pues, que vive acá y subí con él el día de la Navidad y pues yo hablo español bastante bien, pero sabía que iba a tener problemas con pues el acento argentino porque pues cuando hablo
sí.
con él, pues me habla
Él,
así una persona, nada más, solo él y yo. Y pues bueno, todo bien, pero con una casa llena de argentinos fue como... ¡ah! Fue algo
sí,
difícil.
completamente. Es la misma cosa con el acento de mm, Quebec.
El acento de Quebec.
En francés, para mí, la primera vez que antes ah, era diciendo que eh, me he elegido
Ujú,
o he elegido de ir a asistir a
ujú,
esos eventos en línea, the Toastmasters.
ujú. Sí, ya me
Ah,
acordé.
am, entonces, la primera vez que iba, no
Ujú.
entendí nada.
Mm,
porque era, era, era diciendo, no hay problemas, tu francés es bueno, tú hablas un buen nivel. Y pues, cuando he ido, en los dos primeros segundos, había un hombre me preguntando a una cosa y directamente no he entendido lo que ha dicho. Sí.
Ujú.
Entonces, los acentos son
Bueno.
difíciles a veces.
Pues bueno, solo es una cuestión de práctica y acostumbrarte a acentos distintos.
Exactamente. Ahora no es un problema para mí. Ahora soy acostumbrado a ese raro acento. Es un acento raro para mí, pero en general, por ejemplo, si eh, eres una persona que he crecido allá, por ejemplo,
Ujú.
es completamente normal, es el acento normal, pero para que alguien viendo de un otro país que no es hispanohablante como, como nativo.
Ujú, ujú.
Sí. O quien habla francés, no
Mm.
necesariamente hispanohablante.
Ah, ok.
Pero bueno,
Pues sí.
ahora no me explico muy bueno.
Muy bien, pues bueno, está bien.
Sí,
Solo estás aprendiendo. Todo bien, todo bien.
exactamente. Siempre, siempre mejorando.
Así siempre tiene que ser.
Ok, pienso que ahora podemos terminar el podcast. Entonces,
Está bien.
gracias otra vez por viendo aquí
Claro, fue un placer.
y a todos los oyentes un muy gran gracias por haber
Escuchado.
oído. Exactamente, gracias.